Hey guys, this is Mrs. Yeagle, and this is the second part of Chapter 15. I'm on the bottom of 270, right after the page break. So we're thinking, is there a change of setting? Is there a change of time? Is it a change of point of view? Keep all of that in mind and see if you can figure out what's different about this page break. The Gryffindor common room was always very crowded these days, because from 6 o'clock onward, the Gryffindors had nowhere else to go. They also had plenty to talk about, with the result that the common room often didn't empty until past midnight. Harry went to get the invisibility cloak out of his trunk right after dinner and spent the entire evening sitting on it, waiting for the room to clear. Fred and George challenged Harry and Ron to a few games of exploding snap, and Ginny sat watching them, very subdued in Hermione's usual chair. This is the second time they've used the word subdued. Do we know what it means? Matthew? Yeah, so it means calm. Yeah, subdued, mellow, calm. Okay, so everybody's super mellow in the Gryffindor common room. Alexis?
I also want to know what Ginny's role is.
Yeah.
They introduced her, and they could have just said Ron's sister and not put her
Yeah, but she has a real name.
If you read the back, it says something about unwanted attentions of Ron's.
Uh-huh. Because she does have a crush on him, but is there going to be more coming? Good. Great question. What is Ginny's role? Harry and Ron kept losing on purpose, trying to finish the games quickly. But even so, it was well past midnight when Fred, George, and Ginny finally went to bed. Harry and Ron waited for the distant sounds of 2 dormitory doors closing before seizing the cloak, throwing it over themselves, and climbing through the portrait hole. It was another difficult journey through the castle, dodging all the teachers. At last they reached the entrance hall, slid back the lock on the oak front doors, squeezed between them, trying to stop any creaking, and stepped out into the moonlit grounds. "Course," said Ron abruptly as they strode across the black grass, "we might get to the forest and find there's nothing to follow. Those spiders might not have been going there at all. I know it looked like they were moving in that sort of general direction, but..." His voice trailed away hopefully. They reached Hagrid's house, sad and sorry looking with its blank windows. When Harry pushed the door open, Fang went mad with joy at the sight of them. Worried he might wake everyone at the castle with his deep, booming barks, they hastily fed him treacle fudge from a tin on the mantelpiece, which glued his teeth together. Harry left the invisibility cloak on Hagrid's table. There'd be no need for it in the pitch-dark forest. "Come on, Fang, we're going for a walk," said Harry, patting his leg, and Fang bounded happily out of the house behind them, dashed to the edge of the forest, and lifted his leg against a large sycamore tree. Harry took out his wand, murmured, "Lumos," and a tiny light appeared at the end of it, just enough to let them watch the path for signs of spiders. "Good thinking," said Ron. "I'd like mine too, but, it'd probably blow up or something." Harry tapped Ron on the shoulder, pointing at the grass. 2 solitary spiders were hurrying away from the wand light into the shade of the trees. "Okay," Ron sighed as though resigned to the worst. "I'm ready. Let's go." So with Fang scampering around them, sniffing tree roots and leaves, they entered the forest. By the glow of Harry's wand, they followed the steady trickle of spiders moving along the path. They walked behind them for about 20 minutes, not speaking, listening hard for noises other than breaking twigs and rustling leaves. Then, when the trees had become thicker than ever, so that the stars overhead were no longer visible, and Harry's wand shone alone in the sea of dark, they saw their spider guides leaving the path. Harry paused, trying to see where the spiders were going, but everything outside his little sphere of light was pitch black. He'd never been this deep into the forest before. He could vividly remember Hagrid advising him not to leave the forest path last time he'd been in here. But Hagrid was miles away now, probably sitting in a cell in Azkaban, and he had also said to follow the spiders. Something wet touched Harry's hand and he jumped backward, crushing Ron's foot, but it was only Fang's nose. "What do you reckon?" Harry said to Ron, whose eyes he could just make out, reflecting the light from his wand. "We've come this far," said Ron. So they followed the darting shadows of the spiders into the trees. They couldn't move very quickly now. There were tree roots and stumps in their way, barely visible in the near blackness. Harry could feel Fang's hot breath on his hand. More than once they had to stop so Harry could crouch down and find the spiders in the wand light. They walked for what seemed like at least half an hour, their robes snagging on low-slung branches and brambles. After a while, they noticed that the ground seemed to be sloping downward, though the trees were as thick as ever. Then Fang suddenly let loose a great echoing bark, making both Harry and Ron jump out of their skins. "What?" said Ron loudly, looking around into the pitch dark and gripping Harry's elbow very hard. "There's something moving over there," Harry breathed. "Listen, sounds like something big." They listened. Some distance to their right, the something big was snapping branches as it carved a path through the trees. "Oh no," said Ron. "Oh no, oh no, oh shut up," said Harry frantically. "It'll hear you." "Hear me," said Ron in an unnaturally high voice. "It's already heard Fang." The darkness seemed to be pressing on their eyeballs as they stood terrified, waiting. There was a strange rumbling noise, and then silence. "What do you think it's doing?" said Harry. "Probably getting ready to pounce," said Ron. They waited, shivering, hardly daring to move. "Do you think it's gone?" Harry whispered. "I don't know." Then to their right came a sudden blaze of light, so bright in the darkness that both of them flung up their hands to shield their eyes. Fang yelped and tried to run, but got lodged in a tangle of thorns and yelped even louder. "Harry!" Ron shouted, his voice breaking with relief. "Harry! It's our car!" "What? Come on!" Harry blundered after Ron toward the light, stumbling and tripping, and a moment later they'd emerged into a clearing. Mr. Weasley's car was standing empty in the middle of a circle of thick trees under a roof of dense branches, its headlights ablaze. As Ron walked open-mouthed toward it, it moved slowly toward him, exactly like a large turquoise dog greeting its owner. "It's been here the whole time," said Ron delightedly, walking around the car. "Look at it. The forest has turned it wild." The sides of the car were scratched and smeared with mud. Apparently it had taken to trundling around the forest on its own. Fang didn't seem at all keen on it. He kept close to Harry, who could feel him quivering. His breathing slowing down again, Harry stuffed his wand back into his robes. "And we thought it was going to attack us," said Ron, leaning against the car and patting it. "I wondered where it had gone." Harry squinted around on the floodlit grounds for signs of more spiders, but they'd all scuttled away from the glare of the headlights. "We lost the trail," he said. "Come on, let's go find them." Ron didn't speak. He didn't move. His eyes were fixed on a point some 10 feet above the forest floor, right behind Harry. His face was livid with terror. Harry didn't even have time to turn around. There was a loud clicking noise, and suddenly he felt something long and hairy seize him around the middle and lift him off the ground so that he was hanging face down. Struggling, terrified, he heard more clicking and saw Ron's legs leave the ground too, heard Fang whimpering and howling. Next moment, he was being swept away into the dark trees. Head hanging, Harry saw that what had hold of him was marching on 6 immensely long, hairy legs, the front 2 clutching him tightly below a pair of shining black pincers. Behind him, he could hear another of the creatures, no doubt carrying Ron. They were moving into the very heart of the forest. Harry could hear Fang fighting to free himself from a third monster, whining loudly, but Harry couldn't have yelled even if he'd wanted to. He seemed to have left his voice back with the car in the clearing. He never knew how long he was in the creature's clutches. He only knew that the darkness suddenly lifted enough for him to see that the leaf-strewn ground was now swarming with spiders. Craning his neck sideways, he realized that they'd reached the ridge of a vast hollow. A hollow that had been cleared of trees, so that the stars shone brightly onto the worst scene he had ever laid eyes on. Spiders. Not tiny spiders, like those surging over the leaves below. Spiders the size of cart horses, 8-eyed, 8-legged, black, hairy, gigantic. The massive specimen that was carrying Harry made its way down the steep slope toward a misty domed web in the very center of the hollow, while its fellows closed in all around it, clicking their pincers excitedly at the sight of its load. Harry fell to the ground on all fours as the spider released him. Ron and Fang thudded down next to him. Fang wasn't howling anymore, but cowering silently on the spot. Ron looked exactly like Harry felt. His mouth was stretched wide in a kind of silent scream, and his eyes were popping. Harry suddenly realized that the spider that had dropped him was saying something. It had been hard to tell because he clicked his pincers with every word he spoke. "Aragog!" it called. "Aragog!" And from the middle of the misty domed web, a spider the size of a small elephant emerged, very slowly. There was gray in the black of his body and legs, and each of the eyes on his ugly, pincered head was milky white. He was blind. "What is it?" he said, clicking his pincers rapidly. "Men!" clicked the spider who had caught Harry. "Is it Hagrid?" said Aragog, moving closer, his 8 milky eyes wandering vaguely. "Strangers," clicked the spider who had brought Ron. "Kill them," clicked Aragog fretfully. "I was sleeping." "We're friends of Hagrid's," Harry shouted. His heart seemed to have left his chest to pound in his throat. Click, click, click went the pincers of the spiders all around the hollow. Aragog paused. "Hagrid has never sent men into our hollow before," he said slowly. "Hagrid's in trouble," said Harry, breathing very fast. "That's why we've come." "In trouble," said the aged spider, but Harry thought he heard concern beneath the clicking pincers. "But why has he sent you?" Harry thought of getting to his feet, but decided against it. He didn't think his legs would support him, so he spoke from the ground as calmly as he could. "They think, up at the school, that Hagrid's been setting something on students. They've taken him to Azkaban." Aragog clicked his pincers furiously, and all around the hollow the sound was echoed by the crowd of spiders. It was like applause, except applause didn't usually make Harry feel sick with fear. "But that was years ago," said Aragog fretfully. "Years and years ago. I remember it well. That's why they made him leave the school. They believed that I was the monster that dwells in what they call the Chamber of Secrets. They thought that Hagrid had opened the chamber and set me free. And you didn't come from the Chamber of Secrets," said Harry, who could feel a cold sweat on his forehead. "I," said Aragog, clicking angrily, "I was not born in the castle. I come from a distant land. A traveler gave me to Hagrid when I was an egg. Hagrid was only a boy, but he cared for me, hidden in a cupboard in the castle, feeding me on scraps from the table. Hagrid is my good friend and a good man. When I was discovered and blamed for the death of a girl, he protected me. I have lived here in the forest ever since, where Hagrid still visits me. He even found me a wife, Mosag, and you see how our family has grown, all through Hagrid's goodness." Harry summoned what remained of his courage. "So you never attacked anyone?"